President of the Republic of Ghana, John Dramani Mahama, has called on African leaders to prioritize peace and stability to unlock the continent's economic potential. He emphasized this during the ongoing Tokyo International Conference on African Development in Yokohama, Japan. President Mahama outlined critical reforms needed to make Africa an attractive destination for international investment. He painted a stark picture of the current global trade landscape, noting that multilateralism is on the retreat and countries are increasingly acting unilaterally in their relationship with the rest of the world. Despite these challenges, he said Africa presents unprecedented opportunity. John Dramani Mahama said the reform agenda extends beyond conflict resolution to economic and governance improvement. He further called for a fundamental shift in international partnership, stating that there must be a move from handouts to leveraging partnerships with countries like Japan to co-create prosperity for all stakeholders. President John Dramani Mahama has stated that Africa must generate between 12 to 15 million jobs each year to accommodate its rapidly growing youth population, according to discussions on youth employment strategy. However, traditional sectors alone cannot meet this massive demand. According to him, the creative sector and youth startups are emerging as key solutions, creating jobs at 4 times the rate of traditional industry. For every job created in agriculture or manufacturing, the creative and renewable energy sectors generate 4 positions. John Dramani Mahama, in a panel discussion at a private-public partnership dialogue in Japan as part of Tokyo International Conference on African Development, indicated that traditional sectors like agriculture and manufacturing cannot absorb the millions entering the job market each year. He mentioned that the rate at which the creative and digital space add jobs is much faster than the traditional economy. This makes investment in these sectors critical for government seeking to absorb the influx of youth people entering the job market. President John Dramani Mahama further warned that if Africa does not create enough jobs fast enough to absorb these young people, then it will be a gunpowder and it could consume the people, highlighting the potential for social unrest if youth unemployment remains unaddressed. President Mahama emphasized the need for policy that fosters an environment conducive.
Apart from that, the creative sector and youth startups are adding jobs faster than the traditional sectors. And so if you take the creatives, renewable energy and those spaces, they add about 4 jobs before you can create 1 job in agriculture or manufacturing. And so investing in that sector means that we can absorb more of the myriad of young people who are coming out of school. If we decide to concentrate on manufacturing and industry, Africa needs to turn up about 12 to 15 million jobs a year. You cannot create that in manufacturing and industry and agriculture alone, but the rate at which the creatives and digital space add jobs is much faster than the traditional economy. So it's a place that we must invest as governments in order that we can absorb more of the youth. We know that we say the youth bulge or the huge youth population in Africa is an advantage, but if we do not create enough jobs fast enough to absorb those young people coming out, then it will become a gunpowder keg and it could consume us.
Private sector growth, highlighting that the private sector seeks areas with good returns on investment. He said the government's role is to create space for the private sector to utilize its creativity.
We must create policy that creates the framework for an enabling environment for the private sector to grow. The private sector is not for the Christmas. It will go where it can get a good rate of return on investment. And so it's government's duty to create the space for the public sector to exercise its creativity. And that is what we need to reorient the public sector to do. As Minister of Communications, in the early days when the tech, ICT sector was exploding, and people were coming home and asking for licenses to set up internet cafes. And if you saw our regulator and the conditions you had to meet and all that, I mean, it was just crazy. I mean, by the time you go through that list, you'll not be able to start anything. And so when I became minister, I said, but why license them? If you want to set up an internet cafe, why don't you just open it if you have the investment? And when we did, internet cafes exploded across the country. They didn't cause any harm. They didn't lead to any coup d'etat, nothing. When we're liberalizing our telecom space, they said, oh, telecom is so important. You cannot give it to the private sector. You know, it's sensitive. The CIA would listen to our conversations and all that. I mean, today, look at the telecom sector. It's contributing so much to the GDP of Africa's growth. So what we need to do is to create the right environment for the young people to thrive. We should not over-regulate. I met with the fintechs last year during the campaign, and I was asking them, what are your problems? And they said, over-regulation. Why don't you ease it up so that we can invest more? And so I think that we must not be too sensitive in guarding and trying to regulate and all that. We must create the space so that these young people can exercise their creative talents and contribute to sustainable growth in our countries.